Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today at Deborah Kobylt Live. My guest today is Pierce Brooks. Thanks for being here, Pierce.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we met each other when you were doing a TEDx talk not too long ago, and
Right.
you're very inspiring to me, and I wanted to have you on.
Thank you.
You are an empowerment speaker, you are a former college athlete,
Right.
and you've had all sorts of experiences in your life that brought you to the point where you want to tell other people about it.
Absolutely.
So stay with us for a moment because I'll explain a little more about what that is. So thanks for joining us. First off, talk to me a little bit about what did you play in college,
hmm
and how did you get to that point where you're playing ball in college?
Yeah. So I played basketball, and it was a long road getting to that point. It started off. I was always the tallest kid in school, and from kindergarten through middle school, I was center in the back row of the class picture always, and every kid and teacher said, they said, you're going to play in the NBA. You're going to play basketball. And I think I talked a little bit about my speech, which you saw. Even my doctor at 2 years old had this prediction that I was going to go to the NBA and be 6'10". I don't know what system he had in place for me to be 6'10", but I was taller than everybody. I had a big feet and all that stuff, but I don't know what.
And that's got to mean you're
That's
going to
gotta
be
be-
in the NBA.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
it, Okay,
Right.
nothing else but the NBA.
Right.
Okay.
So every time I saw him, he'd say, "Oh, make sure you remember me. Sign my autograph. Sign your autograph. All that stuff." And I saw him a lot because my mom worked in the hospital. And yeah. And so at just years and years of that, and at 12 years old, I picked up a basketball, started playing. I was
Did you like it at 12?
well. My first game, I didn't score a basket. I was just running back and forth getting cardio. My second game, I scored one basket, but it was on the opposing team's basket, so it didn't count.
You sound like my middle kid, who happens to be very tall, and people used to say that to him. And let me
Same
tell you,
thing.
I'm not even sure if he ever found the basket, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, by the end of the season, I found the basket, and I was actually the best player. And so, because I was the tallest kid at that time, basketball was very much a position game. So, point guards, power forwards, centers, they each had their unique, assignments. Now the game has become positionless. So, if you're going to be 6'10" or you're the tallest kid, you're going to learn a post game. So, I learned, I was taught jump hooks and drop steps and playing defense on the opposing post player. And I was very dominant from 13 to 15. But then, then reality kind of set in, and so, I played AAU ball, and on my team which is club basketball. On my team was James Harden, who has become, arguably the best scorer in the NBA.
Wow.
Brandon Jennings, who had a fantastic NBA and overseas career, and Austin Day. These three guys didn't start, didn't get playing time, and I was the best player on the team.
Let me ask you, how old were you then at this time?
I was 13.
Did you feel like really cool? Like, wow, I'm playing with these really great players, and I'm the best. I
Yeah.
mean, I know they weren't professional yet, but I'm just
Right.
saying.
Well, everything about I was starting to get local and national attention at this time, and it was validating everything these kids told me and what the doctor said. So I did feel cool. Yeah.
And Dad, too. Let's talk a little bit about Dad, right? Didn't he sometimes leave your games early?
He did. Yeah. So that started. Well, it started really in sophomore year, and if I take a step back, freshman year I was again nationally ranked, and I was on the city championship team. I started as a freshman in high school. Things were going great. That year Henry Bibby was the coach of USC, and he came and sat my mom and I down and offered me a scholarship.
Wow.
And after that point, so I played with Jordan Farmar, who was the best player on our team. He ended up playing for the Lakers and had a great career as well.
Yeah.
So by the time when he left and all these seniors left, now the pressure became, this is Pierce's team. What is Pierce going to do with it? So heading into my sophomore year, I meet a skills coach, who was the first coach to be honest with me, and he said, if you want to play Division I basketball, and he wasn't talking about the NBA, if you just want to play Division I basketball, you need to be a perimeter player, not a post player. And so, I knew he was right, because I no longer had a physical advantage over the opponent. These guys were
Why?
bigger and stronger than I
So
was.
they got bigger and stronger.
Yeah,
Did you
exactly.
tell the good doctor that? The one
Yeah, exactly.
like, listen, look, dude, I only grew to be what? What are you?
Well, I'm 6'5",
I was
which is
gonna
tall
say,
in
I'm not
actual
7 feet,
life.
like
Yeah.
Shaq. It's like, oh my
Right.
God, these guys are enormous, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so sophomore year, so I had to learn a whole different game. It was quicker. The game was faster. I had to dribble now.
It's funny because we talked about my son who's a baseball player, he's a phenomenal baseball player, but he
Right.
grew to be big.
Mhm.
So instead of being the fastest, he was suddenly enormous. So and I don't mean enormous that way, but
Yeah.
muscular.
Sure.
They put him into third base because he was big and strong. So
Wow.
sometimes where you start out isn't where you end up.
Never.
But
Yeah.
by the way, we're talking about all this because we're getting somewhere with
Yeah,
it. You
yeah.
know, this is a guy who was heralded to be just the best. Everybody said you're going to be a player even when you're 5 years old. So you're just following everybody else's dream, essentially.
Right. And so heading into sophomore year, when this is Pierce's team,
Yeah.
and now I have to learn this new position, and season starts in 3 months. I'm working on a new game, and I change my shot, all this stuff. I'm feeling good in practice. Then the game starts. First game, first shot, air ball. Like, well, this isn't like practice.
Oops.
Second shot, air ball. Third shot, air ball. Dad leaves, and I was crushed. And yeah, he walks out early in the first quarter, and those type of performances just lasted for a few games. And he'd send long emails saying you're not going to be this, not going to be that, and it destroyed me. I remember, one story I'll share about. Again, it just broke our relationship. One story I'll share about about my dad that had to do with basketball was he took me to play on the park sometimes, pickup games. And on the park, there's these guys who don't know how to play. They're just hacking and fouling. It's not even fun. You're on blacktop. And I was getting upset because it's like these guys aren't even trying to play. And I expected my dad to kind of step in and say, play the game the right way, stop hacking them. But he
Yeah.
didn't. His reaction was, be tougher, stop being a this, stop being a that. I don't know if I can cuss here, but
You can cuss all you want.
oh, okay. Stop being a bit.
Podcast.
Okay, yeah. So, just all these different things. And so I left when we left, we were going home, and I'm sitting in the passenger seat, and he's lecturing me again on how I need to be tougher. And he hands me a water, and I said, no, I'm okay. I don't want it. And he punches me in the face.
Wow.
And I just sat there, and he told me to get out. And so I'm a sophomore. I don't
Oh my
have
gosh.
a car, none of that stuff. He just drives off, actually makes a loop, and picks me back up, and tells me to get back in the car, drops me off at my mom's, and he didn't talk to me for 2 months. So things like that there's more stories like that. That's one I'll share, but those things happen a lot, and it all started with basketball.
It took me many years in my life until almost very recently to realize that kind of behavior is because of him and not because of you.
Right.
Or if people have done stuff to me, you internalize it because you're thinking to yourself, what did I do wrong? What could I have done better? Oh my God, my dad's upset, in your case.
Right.
And then you internalize it, right? And you take that with you into your life. Am I right?
Yeah, well, this push and pull relationship, when the dynamic is based off performance and performing well, and if you don't perform well, then I'm going to put
get
you in
smacked in
timeout.
the head.
Yeah, exactly. And he was a big guy. He was actually in the '90s. He was a bodyguard for Death Row Records and Suge Knight, and so he was very intimidating guy.
He was
You
a
didn't
tough
mess with
guy.
him. Yeah.
Was he a ball player?
He was a professional kickboxer. He didn't know basketball. That was the other thing. So as I started getting better, I just was like, you don't really know what you're talking about. I couldn't say that.
No,
but
you
that's how
couldn't, or you would have been hit on the other side of the face.
Exactly.
I'm
right.
so sorry he did that. I didn't realize that your dad did that with you.
Yeah,
So after those few months and you were talking to dad again, and I guess you were getting the attention of universities and colleges,
Right.
then what? I mean, dad wasn't very healthy mentally, was he?
Right. Well, I ended up transferring from that school after sophomore year just because, had this contentious relationship with my father. The coach stopped talking to me because I wasn't doing well. Teammates were, it's just an awful situation. But as I learned this new position, I was a smart player, so I was able to get by. Ended up getting a scholarship from the University of San Francisco, and I went there my freshman year. My first year, the coach that recruited me got fired. A new coach came in, this guy named Eddie Sutton, who was a legendary coach from Oklahoma State. He wanted to get 800 wins, and he left the previous university at like 798. So he came to finish the year, gets his 800 win, and a new coach comes in, and he sits us all down. He said, we're not looking to get rid of anybody. We want you to just keep playing hard. I play spring ball. I'm feeling good about myself. He calls me mid-August, and he says, "Hey, Pierce, we're not going to be renewing your scholarship." That was a week after my dad passed away. So it was
How did your dad pass away?
he actually took his life. Yeah. Yeah. So
This is heartbreaking to me, Pierce.
yeah.
What did that do to you? That alone. Here you're in school. You're trying to perform your best, I don't know, maybe just to please everybody else, but to please, you think you're doing the right thing, and then your dad takes his life.
At that time, we didn't have the best relationship, so it was actually harder on my brother. To be honest with you, I felt a little bit at peace. I wasn't happy
Wow.
that it happened, but his presence was just such a, he had a big presence over my life that was, for the most part, I viewed negative at the time. But my brother Julian was very close to him, and it destroyed him. And he was going into being a freshman at high school and was with him almost every day. So, but it definitely shifted perspective and makes you, get closer to your loved ones. I was very close to my mom, and we definitely bonded over that.
But did the coach not know this, that your dad just died, or did they just not care?
He didn't know at all.
Someone
Yeah.
said that to me recently about college sports in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Very often they don't. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't they? You get recruited, maybe not by that guy, but shouldn't they care a little bit, or all they care about is the win?
Well, it depends on which program you're at, but I definitely, that it's just like anything, like even teachers I had, some care, some don't, and it's about building the relationship with the student or the player. Most of the coaches that it's about half and half. I'd say I had great coaches that actually cared about me, and 70% of our conversations wasn't about basketball. It was
But that
about
was
life,
later on.
That was
right?
later
You
on.
had to
yeah.
get there.
Right.
So, all right, you left San Francisco.
Right.
Because this guy sat you down and said, what, no room for you here.
Yeah, and so if he would have told me in March, I would have had time to find a program. But by this time, for a lot of schools, it's already started. So I sat out, and I was just sending my workout tapes to pretty much every university out there. And they said, okay, it looks like you have some talent, but we want to see you play. My only option was to play in junior college.
Right.
Had a decent season, and then I commit to the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. And I have 72 credits, and I needed 66 to get in. But the problem is I only had like 50 transferable credits because I went to USF, and they, you sit down with a counselor, and they say, choose a major. It's like, I don't know what I'm going to choose. What about sociology? Okay, sociology. They sign you up for 8 sociology classes, and you take Catholic social teaching and all these things. And so I had a lot of credits, but none of them transferred, so I lost that scholarship.
Transferable. Oh, so you lost the scholarship now?
I couldn't go there. There wasn't enough time to make up for classes. And so the next thing was I visited University of New Orleans, Division I school. Loved it. My family's originally from New Orleans, and just the food, the culture was great.
Yeah.
So I was excited to go, get a scholarship. That year, the BP oil spill happened. You remember that, right? Yeah.
Yes, of course. Everybody remembers. It was horrifying.
Yeah, and so
we all have that visual image in our head of them cleaning off the little birds, remember,
right.
who couldn't fly because they were just covered in oil, and it was just
awful.
terrible.
Yeah,
okay.
and so because of that, they were defunded from a Division I school to a Division III school, and they couldn't give scholarships. It's heading into August. I don't have many options. Division I schools are either not interested or they filled up their rosters. And my only option was Texas A&M Kingsville, which is South Texas by Corpus Christi. I go there. The coach there, I'll talk about a coach who just doesn't care.
Oh my God, again?
Yeah, so he, you had to set meetings to talk to him. You couldn't just call him up, and it was just he kind of acted like he was Bobby Knight or something. and he, it was after the season. We had a losing season, and I was flying back home in the spring to see my mom for spring break. And he says, he knows I'm flying home. He texts me, "Hey, are you going to the airport? I'll take you." I was like, "This is weird." He's got a personality
shouldn't
now.
you have been used to it, thinking, "Oh man, the ball's gonna drop again"? So or no?
I thought he was like trying to be a human being and have a conversation with me. But I thought wrong. And I get in the car, and he's like, "So how did the season go for you?" It didn't go so great. What do you want to work on? I want to work on my footwork and this and that. He's like, "Okay." So we've decided we won't be renewing your scholarship next year. I'm a junior. I don't have
Right, because you only have so many years for eligibility.
right,
Is that
right.
true
Yeah, you
in
have five.
basketball?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you have 5 years to play 4, and so
I understand.
I couldn't transfer anymore to another NCAA school. And he it actually turned out he did that to. We had 14 players. He did it to 13. He only kept 1. So just crazy. And the assistant coach for that school said, "Hey, there's this school I went to. I know it's not. I know it's North Dakota. I know North Dakota doesn't sound all that attractive when you hear about it, but you should check it out. It's Dickinson State, and I went there. It's a great culture. Great place to go. And I had no ego at this point, and I went, and it was actually the best experience of my life, from a school standpoint. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then what?
At Dickinson,
Did you play pro after that? Like, where did you end up going? I mean, you finally had a coach or a team there that appreciated you for what you did.
Right.
Did you lose? Did you lose some of what your skill? With all that time where you're playing, then you weren't playing it. Or no? Did you always keep it up?
Right after sophomore year, I knew that this NBA, pro dream wasn't it. But I knew at this point that I needed basketball to get an education.
I understand. Well, all along though, was this your dream or was this somebody else's dream?
It was always someone else's dream, and I realized that pretty early on, and I had fun while it was fun in the beginning, just because you're a kid. I mean, but when the pressure started. And there was pressure from the beginning from people to play, right? But when it turned into this is your team and all that stuff, it's like,
Boy, I tell you, it really upsets me a lot because, some of these coaches can just beat the joy out of playing
Right.
from a player. Or let's say you were, on the track to go to the NBA. They took it away from you, really. And I realize that, you just got to keep going and all that. But maybe they did you a favor, right? Because you didn't really want to do it anyway.
Yeah,
What do you think?
Well, I look at it. I take 100% responsibility for
You do.
yeah my journey. I don't blame any of the coaches that I'm actually very happy about all the experiences I had, positive and negative, because it's helped me see things in the workplace that not everything goes the way you want it. You work with some people who you work with some bosses who maybe you need to. They're not personable, and you can't just give them a call, and you have to set a meeting in order to have a conversation with them. So
you learn
I've
that
seen it
early
all.
on.
Yeah, exactly.
Do we need to learn that early on though? Because I've heard many stories from people about coaches who just repeatedly, that's how the game is played, particularly in college. Do you think that's a good thing, or we need a new way of coaching these kids? I think it's demoralizing, personally. I get it.
Yeah.
You can't just pat them on the head and give everybody a trophy. I'm not
Right.
suggesting that.
Right.
But it's almost like you're just disposable. It's like, nope, you're not good enough. Here, we're going to get another player. Or a guy gets fired or leaves,
Right.
and then there's your recruiting coach. You know what I mean?
Well, on the other hand, I mean, they're battling their own pressures
Yeah, I
from the
know.
athletic director, and they need to get wins, and they need to make the decisions that it's a business, and so I think it is valuable to learn that lesson early on, and I'm
Okay.
glad that I learned that. If I would have been 20 years and of seeing just positive things, I wouldn't have been set for the workplace. I just wouldn't have been prepared enough for it.
So what did you do when you stopped playing ball? What did you do? You get out of school, and what was your first job? What did you end up doing?
Yeah. My first job, I was actually, not many people know about this. I was looking for any kind of job, and
Got to do what you got to do.
yeah, exactly. And I was taking apart TVs. It was a friend of mine's company,
Okay.
and so you take the TVs off, you take off the back, and you put each part in different bins. And I was there for one day. I did 60.
One
and-
day?
Yeah. Well,
Was it that awful?
well, the boss came up. He said, "How many did you do?" I said, "I'm all tired. I did 60." He's like, "Okay, we'll get you to about 150 by next week." I said, "No, we won't, because this is my last day."
Yeah,
and,
that's good.
Yeah, so I got out of
You
there.
gotta know when
you
enough
got to
is
know you're
enough.
not a robot. Yeah,
no,
exactly.
No.
And so my next job,
My God.
I worked at an entertainment law firm. I was an executive assistant. Very cool, because we worked on stuff with Kanye West and Earth, Wind and Fire and all types of people. So
What kind of entertainment law? Was it contracts? Or
yeah, it was
what?
contracts. Yeah, and it
I
was
find
TV
that very
and film.
interesting. I was going to go to law school, and if I did, I would have ended up doing contractual law because
Really?
I love the little details in the contracts. I know a lot of people find it boring, but I find it fascinating. you
Yeah,
know?
I was one of the. Yeah, I found it boring.
Oh, you
And-
did?
Well, I mean, parts were fascinating, but for the most part, I was filing and I was, learning a lot because I'd read, just what was going on, and you see, this Kanye West concert, how they're planning for it 2 years out or whatever.
Kind of cool, yeah.
Yeah, it was parts of it were cool to see, but just seeing how stressed the lawyers were, and they're, you thinking they're eating good and getting sushi, no, they're not. They're getting some, they're basically
Really?
getting Lunchables. Yeah.
Lunchables.
Yeah.
The Kanye West lawyers getting Lunchables?
Yep,
I'm going
yep.
to remember that. Okay.
And so after that, I just realized, I didn't want to do this. I wanted to get into something different. And my uncle, who's my biggest mentor, he actually.
Good. You had
Yeah.
somebody. Okay.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
yeah,
You
yeah,
needed
yeah.
somebody out there. Okay.
Oh, of course, yeah. And I definitely should talk about him. I mean, his name is Bill Duffy. He's one of the biggest sports agents in the NBA and really in all of sports. And
I know
he's
the
been-
name. Yeah.
Yeah. He's been a fantastic, bright light in my life, just
Good.
all around. He really showed me what it was like to just be a man and take responsibility. I mean, he taught me all that. And was supportive, whether things are going great or not so great.
Before we continue on the journey, were you ever down about all this, or did you just say, "Okay, I got to get up tomorrow and just keep going"? Did it ever bring you down, or were you so resilient that you were able to just keep going?
I was very down going back to my sophomore year when
Of what?
of high school
Of
when
high school.
when all that was going on with my dad and
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems it correlates right at the time when you were having trouble with your dad.
yeah. No, I just went into deep isolation, just kind of stayed in my room. Yeah, it was a really rough time. But after that, when I transferred to a different school, I started, socializing with better friends and just enjoying myself in my high school experience. And
Yeah.
it wasn't all around basketball.
Yeah.
And that was part of it too. Just I mean, my freshman, sophomore year was just basketball, and I was unhappy.
I think you were unhappy because it wasn't your dream.
Right.
You
right,
know, I
absolutely.
mean, some kids can do that, but it's really all they want. We're going to talk about Kobe in a little bit. You think about Kobe. I think that's all he ever did as a freshman and sophomore, but that was his dream.
Sure.
He
Yeah.
wasn't
He knew
living
at
it
8 years old.
Yeah,
Maybe
absolutely.
Younger than that, probably.
I mean, my son, who's a baseball player, we can't get him away from the cages like you can. It's like, you want to go do this? It's like, no. And he's a great athlete in
Yeah.
anything he does.
Yeah.
In fact, the other night he called us. He went bowling, and even in bowling, he ends up doing a perfect score, like 10 games in a row. I'm like, look, dude, you could do anything.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
maybe if he was 6'5", he would have gone into basketball because he plays that well too.
Right.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah, but there's the other part of that I can't complain about. These people around me thought I could accomplish something great. There are other people who their circle around them is saying, you can't do this, you can't do that. And in my scenario, everybody believed that I could accomplish this amazing thing. So that also played a factor in me, just from an early age, believing in myself that I could accomplish great things.
That's great.
Yeah, and
Right?
I
I
took
mean,
that
it's-
part with me, definitely.
That's very. So then you still had that resilience. I mean, even though you had an awful sophomore year in school,
Right.
you were able to rise above it
Yes,
beyond
yeah.
what Dad did.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
How
I
about your
had-
mom? What kind of an influence was she on you?
Yeah, Mom is fantastic. She's
Mom is fantastic.
Yeah, mom is she's the goat. She is just a hardworking. She's been a single mom since we were 12, and she's the lead technician in cardiology department at Kaiser. She's been working in Kaiser
Wow.
for 30 plus years. Highly celebrated. I mean, they're pretty much giving her an award every other year.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's pretty outstanding.
Yeah, and she's sacrificed for her two boys like no other. And I'm very inspired. Well, part of what I'm driven to do is really just hopefully find a way to give back in the way that she gave to me for a long time and is still doing. Yeah.
So as you continued on, you got that job in the entertainment law firm,
Yeah.
but that wasn't really speaking to you either.
Right.
What then? Let's cut to what you finally found that did speak to you.
Yeah.
What did you end up doing? I think you were in marketing and
Yeah,
sales,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So my uncle had this contact with an energy drink company.
We're talking
and-
Bill Duffy.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And he said, there's this company that I know. Why don't I can set up a meeting for you to just sit down with him. And that's what I appreciate about how he operates. He doesn't hand me anything. He just is willing to, give me the contact, and I have to do the rest. And so I sat down in an interview, and they're like, we don't, I don't know if we have a place for you, but maybe you can be, executive assistant for now. So I was employee number 12. They sent me to All-Star Weekend, and because they had two athletes that they sponsored, and I crushed it because I was an athlete and I knew how to relate to these guys. and they instantly promoted me to a marketing position within
Okay.
first 2 weeks. And I knew, so then I became a field marketing manager. So I was overseeing an activation team all throughout the nation. We launched 7-Eleven and Circle K and
Oh, wow.
Target, some major retailers. And our team was a huge part of that. And so I've really found this purpose, and I loved marketing. And in field marketing, you're connecting with people one-to-one. And so, that was just fantastic. And from there, an opportunity came through for cannabis. And so a cannabis company reached out to me and was looking for someone who did what I did. And I just jumped
Really
aboard.
knocked it out of the park, right?
Oh, yeah.
How many years have you been? You're selling. What are you doing with the cannabis?
Yeah, so I'm the.
It makes it sound like you're selling on a street corner. I didn't mean it that way. I mean,
Yeah.
What are you?
Well, that's what
doing
we're
with it?
doing a little bit, but
Yeah.
no.
But why not? You had a lot of experience with selling.
Yeah.
But what are
so,
you doing for the company?
So I'm the field marketing director. I oversee an activation team throughout California.
But what does that mean? Like you're going to small companies, or what do you do?
Yeah, it's all in-house. I have an in-house team that's an event team. So we do demos at retail locations. We do events, trade shows, all those things.
And is it the raw cannabis, and then people could do what they want with it, or is it you're selling it to go into food products? I mean, what
Yeah,
do you
so
do?
we have a brand. So it's actually it's flower, which is the buds. We have pre-rolls and concentrates, and
Man, that's exploding.
yeah, we have our own farm in South Monterey where we have about 280,000 square feet of cultivation. So
Well, it's great because at least you know where your cannabis is coming from.
yeah.
You know, I remember initially I really was not in favor of legalization, and now I am, because at least you know where it's coming from. You don't know what it's, because you never really knew what this stuff was laced with when you were getting it on a street corner.
Sure, and that's where VapeGate came from, is that the illicit market, right? It's the unclean product. Yeah.
So what got you into the whole motivational speaking? You know, from all this experience with sports and coaches and people that, you know, they kind of let you down in a way. And but as you said, it's a business. And with a dad who was not very supportive, or probably wanted to be supportive but didn't know how.
Sure.
Had his own demons.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you get into what you're doing now, to speak to other people, to motivate them, to empower them?
Yeah, I like empower because motivational speaker, it's just, I don't know, I don't want to claim to motivate people, but how I got into it, when I went to Dickinson State, I had some fabulous teachers, and I all of a sudden, because basketball wasn't the focus, I was more focused in education, and I was participating more in class, and had some amazing professors. And I was asked to give a presentation in the library about urban versus rural living, because I had lived everywhere. And I'm giving this presentation, and the president of the school just is walking through. And as I'm giving this presentation, apparently he stops and he listens to the rest of the presentation. He, after I'm done, he comes up to me. He's like, you are a very gifted speaker. I was like, oh, wow, thank you. And fast forward 2 months later, they call me into the office, and they said, we've for commencement this year, we've never had a student speaker, and we want you to do it.
Wow.
So I was like, wow, yeah.
So you did.
Yep, I did.
Well, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
What did you talk about? Your life, or?
Yeah, I talked about just perspective and how I didn't, expect what I was going to get out of North Dakota, and it actually turned out to be, the best place for me, where I met amazing people, and I brought up just topics about how we always need to be open to new possibilities, and as we're going on to this next phase of life, it's all about perspective.
No, it's true, and very often you just get beaten down, and right, just like what happened to you, you were presented with an opportunity. It's like, well, I don't want to really go there, and then it turned out to be one of the best opportunities that ever happened to you,
It was
right? And it
fantastic,
set you on a certain, I guess it helped you reframe what was going on, right, in your head a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. I just had to go with the flow and make the most out of it.
So from there, though, that speech, and I know that you continue to sell. You're in the marketing business. How did you get into public speaking? How did you get into doing what you do, like at a TEDx? That's a big one.
Yeah, well, after I gave this commencement address, I had people just came up to me, and they're like, wow, just wanting to talk with me, and were inspired by what I said. And I was like, how can I find a way to do more of this? So I joined Toastmasters, which is one of the largest public speaking programs. Just kept doing it, and TEDx was a big goal of mine. And so I just came across an event organizer, shared my story, and
You were terrific.
Thank
You were
you.
really terrific. You were very on point, and the story about your dad really hit me, and how you just continued to keep going. So I know that
you came up to me right after, and
I did. I thought you were really great.
I'll
I
never
really
forget
did.
that. Yeah, thank you.
You really spoke to me.
Thank you.
So your empowerment speaking, you have different. I mean, what you do. We don't have all the time to get into it, but
Sure.
you talk about social pressure. Can we go through them very, very briefly? Because I
Yeah.
also want to talk a little bit about Kobe and what he meant to you growing up.
Oh, sure.
We talk about social pressure.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, in my case, everyone pointed me in this one direction, and to play basketball. And it's really about finding who you are, because we're all going to battle social pressure. I mean, we all have the friends who are telling us how to live, and as we, it starts out very small. It starts out with our parents, and then our families, and as we go to school, it's classmates and teachers, but now it's social media, which has pretty much found a way to extend high school. And how do you find out who you are in this environment? And it's really
It's
about
hard when you've got noise coming
Right,
at you, especially
right.
from your parents.
yeah.
So how did you? I mean, how would you suggest that someone else overcomes that?
I think it's about really looking deep in yourself and asking you the tough questions of,
Is this what you want?
if this is what you want to do? And I'm sure we'll talk about this with Kobe. For me, with basketball, like we talked about, I did the practice for 2 hours, but I didn't want to wake up at 6 a.m. to do this. I didn't want to go the extra mile. I didn't want to wake up at, I didn't want to work on this until midnight and 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
For speeches, I do that. For speeches, I get up at 5 a.m.
Because
and
that's where you belong.
Exactly. And
You
I
know?
love doing it. And so I'm willing to go through the process that isn't so fun, because it's what I love to
But
do.
actually, it is fun. If you're
It
up
is,
at
yeah.
5 in the morning writing a speech and you
Right.
love doing that,
Right.
you know that. It
Right.
is fun because you're like, oh, yeah, but getting up at 5, I love that. But getting up at 5 for somebody else's dream
Yeah.
to throw a basketball,
Not
no.
so fun. No.
Wow, I love that.
You'll hit the snooze button.
And that leads into number 2, the realization, which we already talked about. You ask yourself the hard questions. Is this really what I want to do, right?
Right. Exactly.
Scary, though, to step off when other people are expecting something from you, right?
Yeah, it can be scary, and that's where it's when we talk about pivoting. In basketball, I was able to kind of translate what I heard from or what I learned from basketball to be able to shift in a different direction.
I love the pivot word because, it's obviously.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it can be scary, but what isn't scary? I think it's more scary to stay in something that doesn't move you.
There's nothing more terrifying to me. I'm really very sincere about that. Like to just be stuck in something you don't like.
Right.
No,
Yeah, that's
I would rather take 100 chances than to do that. You have to ask yourself that. Do you want to be here, or do you want to just keep trying for something else? I mean, a lot of doors get slammed in people's faces.
Right. Well, I want to ask you, how did you get into what you're doing?
Broadcasting.
Yeah.
When I was a little kid, and I would always, I had such a funny background. I was always thinking to myself, why? Like nothing ever seemed quite right. Everything was odd. So I was asking a lot of questions to the point where my parents said I was a pest. I asked too many questions.
I'm like that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, really?
That's a key, to
Tony
be
over there
curious.
is laughing that I'm a pest. Okay, Tony, we'll discuss this later. So no, it's true. My mother would call me a pest. And we had a typewriter that my dad kept out because he had a third job. My father had 3 jobs. One of them was, I don't know, typing something for doctors, when they would dictate, and so he would type it out. So I would go on the typewriter and just start writing little short stories. I love to write. And then when I went to college, I didn't know what to do. So I was actually a math major, and because I'm good in math, and I wandered around Rutgers, and I saw the college newspaper, and I got my first article, and I did something a little different with it that wasn't expected, and then it ended up on. It was a big school. Rutgers is huge.
What a
so
great university.
Yeah, it ended up on the front page of the Rutgers Targum. And then it got picked up by the Star Ledger in New Jersey. And then from there on, I'm like, all right, I guess I can do this. So it got me on. Somebody believed in me that I could do it.
Yeah.
And then I was actually more in print. And then somebody said to me one day, why don't you just try TV? My story is a little crazy because, I had a lot of, moments, many Me Too moments back then. And I just kept going, never really had the courage to speak out about it, but I had plenty of them.
Wow.
That could get you down. But you just have to keep going, right?
Sure,
The same
absolutely,
thing.
yeah.
You just have to keep going. Um, yeah. When I came out here, I found a lot of, I don't know, it seemed as though the more professional people that I worked with, the better it was. It was always the little guys at the bottom I found difficult.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally understand that.
But I want to talk about Kobe because that, wow, the reaction nationwide and around the world surprised a lot of people. It didn't surprise me. I think he was an outstanding character. He certainly had his flaws. We all know that. They were public, but thoughts?
I mean, it's just obviously devastating for everybody, whether you are a basketball or sports fan, or I mean, it's just if you're a human being, it's just heartbreaking. My experience with Kobe, as far as how I viewed him, I was a Kobe hater for a long time. Actually,
Why?
well, I was a Laker fan to start when I was very young, and then if you remember, Shaq and Kobe had their feud.
Yeah.
And when Shaq left, fans chose a side, and I chose to go with Shaq. So I would just tune in all of Kobe's games and hate on him, but it's an uncomfortable feeling to be a Kobe hater because he's so great, and you're going to be on the wrong side of the stick more often than not. And I just remember just seeing, I mean, you saw so many great moments, obviously, championship runs.
We've been to so many of his games.
Did you? Yeah.
So many. Yeah. And I remember just watching I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
No.
because I would bring the boys, they were little.
Yeah.
And I remember just watching how he was the Mamba, and he would just sort of snake his way through people. And I would sit there and say, how did he do that? I mean, it was shocking to me how he could get through all these guys and then dunk, or whatever the heck he did. I mean, it was shocking how good he was.
Yeah, well, he was just another level. And so when he retired, even though I had spent so much time hating on him, it was just bittersweet because I knew we weren't going to see anyone like him. And going into this next phase of his life as a father, it was just beautiful to watch. As we talked about, I had a negative relationship with my dad. So any positive father-son or father-daughter interactions, I just was captivated by. And also another point is that in 2008, I was heavily inspired by Barack Obama, just being a powerful black man rising through the political ranks. One of the things I watched more than anything was how he engaged with Sasha and Malia. And I remember thinking, he makes having daughters look cool. And not that I'm not saying having daughters is not cool.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. Come on, throughout the history of the world, people are like, oh, I'm sure you want a son.
Well, yeah, generally men, they want to have their son. And Barack Obama's the first person that made me think that, if I only had daughters, I wouldn't be disappointed. And not only would I not be disappointed, I'd be happy as hell. And Kobe was an extension of that. So to see how
big time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, to see how he was with Gigi, and those tapes where he's on the sideline just going through what he sees on the court was just beautiful. I must have watched that in a loop 50 times.
I'm disappointed because I think he really would have turned around so much for women and young girls in sports. Because a lot of times we were discouraged. It was like not a career for a young girl.
Yeah.
It's like not anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean? We see it in soccer. We see it everywhere. But especially in women's basketball.
Yeah.
And I think that will live on because I think they're going to make sure that it does.
Yeah.
The what is it? Mama Cheetah?
Mamacita.
Mamacita.
Yeah.
That will live on.
Oh,
and
of course. Yeah.
So I'm sorry he won't get to live long enough to even continue in his own voice,
Right. Well, that's a great point because I have a buddy who works at ESPN, and I talked to him 2 days after the incident, and he said, this is a bigger loss for the WNBA than the NBA. And I was like, what's he talking about? And the more I thought about it, it's like, he's right. Kobe was an ambassador, like you said, for women's sports, and I think he went to more WNBA games than NBA games.
But imagine that, for the love of his daughter and daughters.
Right.
He wanted to make sure that they had a future. Yeah, he almost seemed disinterested in what was going on in the NBA. And they even asked him, why don't we see you courtside more often? He goes, I'm having way more fun doing this with my daughter and her teammates than I ever could. I mean, he loved what he was doing. So,
well, I look at him, I'll remember him most, obviously, as I'll remember the championship runs and all that stuff as a phenomenal player and great father, but I'll remember him as a philosopher. I think his purpose was to take all the lessons and wisdom that he accumulated over his playing career and life and give that to the next generation. A lot of what you see with greats, whether it be athletes or whatever, they say the same cliche phrases of what it takes to be great. Oh, it's hard work, it's dedication, it's sacrifice. But what is that really? Kobe showed you exactly what it took to be Kobe Bryant through the Mamba Mentality books and his interviews and coaching, like you said. So that's his legacy.
I interviewed Byron Scott, who was
Mm-hmm.
the former Lakers coach, and he got to see Kobe when he was really young, actually at a practice somewhere in Hawaii, he was telling me.
Right.
And he used to say, you know, in later years when he was on the Lakers, Kobe was the guy in the back of the bus. I think you probably saw that interview or commented on it, or if not, he said, well, Kobe was the one guy in the back of the bus reading Time magazine.
Right, yeah.
You know, he always wanted to, whatever he was learning, he wanted to know more.
Yeah.
He wasn't looking at the funny pages or the comics. He was back there, Time magazine. I was always impressed because he would stay after a game and continue shooting. I love that.
Well, and it's that curiosity, like you talked about. You asked a lot of questions, and I like to ask a lot of questions too. And Michael Jordan talked about that at the memorial. He's like, you know, I get annoyed at this kid because he's texting me at 3 a.m. Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That's me. I do that to people too. And they're
Yeah.
like, Deborah, don't you sleep? And it's like, if
Right.
I'm really into something, no, turn your phone off. I got something to say.
Right. So I think that's another key too, is to remain curious and have people you look up to, and don't be afraid to reach out to them.
You're absolutely right. Well, I've really enjoyed having you in here. Is there something you want to tell people, how they can get in touch with you? Where are you speaking next?
Yeah, so I'll be speaking next at UC Irvine. We're still working on a date. It looks like
great.
it could be the end of next month.
I find you so inspiring. You're right. I walked right up to you. There's a lot of people I could have walked up to that day, and I targeted you because I really, I don't know, something about the way you spoke. You're also very articulate, and I really felt for your story early on.
Thank you so much.
You know,
appreciate
I
that.
really did. So UC Irvine, and where else?
UC Irvine, they're still working on some other college campuses. Some have reached out, but nothing definitive yet. You can find me on Instagram at Pierce J. Brooks. I'm on Twitter. I'm still working out. I just created a Twitter. Are you on Twitter?
I'm not the biggest Twitter person, but
Yeah.
I'm on it because I have to be on it. You know?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
personally am an Instagram person. I think
Yeah.
it's really easy. And if I'm looking for something for videos, I just go to YouTube. That's where
okay.
I am.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I guess you could have a Twitter.
Yeah, so there's nothing really there, but we'll get there. LinkedIn / Pierce Brooks, and please check out my speech on YouTube, my TEDx speech. It's called "Playing the Game of Social Pressure," and would love your feedback.
It's fantastic. It's really
Thank you.
terrific.
Thank you so much.
Playing the game
Of social pressure.
of social pressure. Okay, yeah, please look that up. How's that doing?
You know, actually, we had to. There's someone I'm working with, and we had to kind of take a step back and work on just my overall PR plan. But it's going okay. It's just, you know, kind of organic growth right now.
Yeah, I know. It takes a while, but just like with your philosophy with work, you'll get there. You just keep going a day at a time.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I appreciate you joining us because I think you have a lot of value in what you say.
Thank you.
You know, you've been through a lot, and to me, what I get out of you is, if you love what you're doing, you're going to get up at 5 a.m. and do it.
Yes, you will.
And if you don't, you're doing it for somebody else. You're never really going to want to get up at 5 a.m. and do it. So
That's right.
Wise words from you, Pierce. Thank you so much for being here, and
Thank you,
thank you
Deborah.
everybody for joining us today on Deborah Kobylt Live. You can find us on YouTube and Facebook, and then we post all of our promos on Instagram, and then of course Apple Podcasts and iHeartRadio and Spreaker, and honestly, anywhere you get your podcasts, you can find us. So thanks for being here, Deborah Kobylt Live, and we'll see you next time. Bye.